Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a show for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. My name is Chris Looney, and I have the good fortune to be your host for this deep dive into fundraising. Our show endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. Let's remember, if you're a staff in a nonprofit, you are a fundraiser, even if your job title doesn't carry advancement or development in that title. This is especially true of chief executives of nonprofits who find a lot of their activities revolving around fundraising. Today, we're pleased to welcome Dyan Sublett, one of the most respected and successful fundraisers I know. The topic of our conversation today is all about what Dyan wished she knew early in her career and the lessons she's learned as a fundraiser who followed her heart. So welcome to the show, Dyan.
Thank you, Chris. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. We've known each other for a long time, but I feel like I'm going to learn a lot from you during this conversation. We're looking forward to learning from you and taking advantage of your amazing experience and expertise. Currently, you are the president of the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Health Foundation, and you've been a leader at the hospital and with the foundation for more than 13 years. Is that right?
That's right. I started my career there in 2012, February 2012. In 2017, I also became Chief Communications Officer for the health system, and in 2019, added in Chief Government Affairs Officer. So I wear three hats, but they are all very integrated.
Well, yeah, I would have to believe that they are, though I'm a little bit scared for you about the additional titles that they might choose to add in the future. Be wary of that, right?
Well, I think I've come to the limit on that, but I have great teams, and that is the key. That's been the key for me for my whole career, just
Oh,
being
that's awesome.
a great team.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit more about that journey. You have this amazing leadership journey in the nonprofit space. And I'd love for you to share with the audience a little bit about how you became the leader you are today.
I think I began my leadership journey by being the oldest in a large family. And when I
Good.
think about leadership, that's where I begin in my head. I like to say that I was born bossy. And not just bossy, but if you are a girl, the oldest in a large family full of boys, what you quickly have to figure out is to get them to want to do what you need them to do. So you sort of develop that along the way. I think I became a leader around the age of 6. And so that was my management training,
That's
and
great.
I loved it. Then I developed into my career. So my leadership journey in fundraising began quite intentionally with mission. And that's important, and it's something that I always advise people that I'm mentoring. If you are in love with the mission, you will find your way.
Hmm.
And in this case, the mission that attracted me, I was finishing grad school. I have a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing. I had that year become the Massachusetts Poetry Fellow, but I needed to support myself. And
Yeah.
there was a small college in the area that I just loved. It was only 6 years old, non-traditional, would have been perfect for me as a student. I would have taken any job they offered. And I kept going back and talking to them, figuring I could write, I could teach, I could organize. And they finally said, how about director of annual giving and parent relations? And
Oh,
I
perfect.
said, what's that?
Right,
And
of
they
course.
said, we're not really sure,
Oh my gosh, that's
but
great.
we're told that you could figure it out. So my first job allowed me a long leash figuring it out. It was with a very young college that was finding its way in non-traditional terms and would be the right place to grow me up. I was determined that I wanted to be part of the success of that place. And that is what drove me in the future. My next part of my journey was driven more by interests, by personal interests. I was recruited there after 7 years to Sundance Institute, which was also very young. Sundance was
Of
only six
course.
years old.
Wait, how old was it when you joined?
Sundance was only 6 years old when
Oh
I
my
joined
gosh. Wow.
Sundance.
Yeah.
And like Hampshire, I was asked to build programs. So I had to set the platform, build the programs, and my background in the creative arts that included actually music and dance really led me to that storytelling love and
Right.
that independence. Um, from there, much more traditional part to my journey, UCLA, very big major research organization, university, but again, interests. I became very interested in the idea that women needed to be more engaged in philanthropy as major donors. And I was able to co-found and co-direct the first Women in Philanthropy program there. And
Wonderful.
recently, or UCLA recently celebrated its 30th year of the program.
Mm, awesome.
Following my interests along the way, I have a cycle of about 7 years in most all the places. And finally, the last part of my journey had to do with challenge. So I went from mission to interest to challenge.
Okay.
Challenge is where I am now. Like the beginning, a very new place, 3 years before the hospital even opened, still trying to imagine a state-of-the-art facility in a poor community. So that was considered to be impossible. We like to say improbable. I wanted to be part of that success. This is in South LA.
Hmm.
The old hospital had closed in 2007, and the new hospital was completely reimagined, and the challenge was to deliver state-of-the-art care to that community. So the challenge really suits me. I always have loved challenges, and I've always loved following my interests.
No, that's great. That's amazing. And I know that there have been some great roles that you've had with organizations like the YMCA and the museum, right? As well. And I'm just trying to think, what was your favorite, or what would you say was your favorite role professionally of all of those, and why?
Yeah. Um, the one I'm in now.
Great, great. Why? Yeah, why?
And if you asked me, Chris, that question 10 years ago, I'd probably give you the same answer.
I think
I
that's
have
probably true of
always
most
loved the
people.
job that I was in.
That's great. And you recognize that they all build off each other and give you skills that you need for the next adventure, right?
Yeah. Reflecting on that question, it's a little bit like if you've ever had a child, and I know you have, and I have, we used to say, oh, this is our favorite age. And she's 3, and then she's
Right.
7, and then we say, this is our favorite age.
That's
And,
right.
and it's sort of growing along the way. In this particular job, the one that I have now, the fact that I have the latitude to fully engage my interests and myself in different areas, from communications to fundraising to even the government affairs piece. We are a public-private institution. I love. It's the biggest challenge, and it keeps me happy.
That's great. Yeah. Well, good for you for liking challenges, really thorny issues and complicated situations, because you thrive in that for sure. Um, who were some of the really important mentors in your life? I know that you've been blessed to have a lot of people that have helped you throughout your career. I say that because I know some of the people that you've worked with and maybe dare I say for many years, and they're just amazing people. But who have been your instrumental mentors?
I I think I will give you three, each in a different category.
Great.
And when we think about the word mentor, even when I was a student in college, I was very, very um, aggressive, ambitious, intentional, one of those words, in
Yeah.
choosing and cultivating the faculty who would become my mentors.
Great.
And in my job, in my first role, the most important mentor, not only for that role, but often long into my career, was a board member. And it was, as I described it, a small college, non-traditional, very, very distinguished board, but small board. I was given the chief development officer role very young, within 5 years, and there was a lot I didn't know. This
Sure.
board member responded to me when I asked, and he was the head of a bond firm, the largest bond firm on Wall Street. And I knew that as an English major and an MFA grad, I did not have the financial acuity that I might need. So I asked him if he could teach me how to read balance sheets, how to read finance reports, um, get me up to speed with financial literacy. And I did a lot of work seeing alumni and donors in New York. So I would visit with him, schedule an hour on my New York trips. And
Yeah.
along the way, he became invested in my career, invested in my success,
Right.
and a mentor. And one of the things that he said to me was, the board really thinks like I do. We think that you will be very, very successful in your career if we could only get you to stop being so serious. And I
Good.
said, I am so young, I had to, project this seriousness. And I am by nature a more or less serious person. But he made me laugh. And I realized that bringing myself to the role and not appearing to be something else was what
Yeah.
he was telling me.
Right.
And
Right.
the other very important piece of advice he gave me was that you should always spend 10% of your time thinking about your next role. Don't wait until you think it's time to leave. Don't wait until you're 70% there, etc.,
Mhm.
because that is how you shape where you want to grow. And he said, you will find your best next roles when you're happy with the
Okay.
role that you are. That's why that 10% rule is so important. Because on a day-to-day basis, all the time I would say, well, why should I think about that? I really like what I'm doing. And 10%. And it showed me during my career, as I began to hire people and interview them, that the people who seemed a little desperate, a little hungry to leave, a little pushed, in that sense, were not appealing to me.
Yeah. Right.
And I understood what he meant about pursuing that next role that would be right for you, but spending the time you need in your head shaping it. My second mentor that I'd like to talk about is a colleague and now a dear friend. And you know her quite well. So my dear friend and colleague first was someone I admired in the field. And we were not friends yet, but we found ourselves sometimes in meetings together professionally. And I determined I was going to try to develop a friendship. So I did
Good.
the same thing I did with my first mentor, ask questions.
Yeah.
I'm always known for asking a lot of questions and following up. And gradually, collegial professional friendship developed. And now over the decades, it has developed into a very, very deep, respectful, loving, caring friendship.
Wonderful.
It was important to me to have a mentor who was a colleague in my field.
Hmm. Yeah.
And one of the most important pieces of advice she gave me was when I was stressed about preparing a presentation to the board for what they would need to invest, money I needed for my program, right? And
Yep.
I had a board that was going to be tough on that, and I was worried. And I said, what if they don't give me the money I need to develop this program, and I still have these goals?
Right.
And she said something important that I have passed on to others and that I continue to remember. She said, your job is to tell them what they need to get the job done. That is your job.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
once they listen to that, assuming they respond, then you go get the job done.
Right.
But your job is not to get the job done on $1 when you need $10.
Right.
Your job is to tell them what it
That's right.
takes to
That's
get to
right.
the finish line. And on the day before my presentation, that was such an enormous relief to me because I knew what it would take to get to the finish line.
That's
So it
right.
freed me, again, like my earlier mentor, to simply use what I knew and be myself.
That's right. I've always loved the if then proposition, which is if you provide these resources,
Hmm.
then this will become
Hmm.
an attainable goal.
That's right.
If
If
you do
this is
not,
where you want to go, and we would love to get there, this
yes,
is what we'll need to get there together.
if then, right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's great.
And my third mentor is a different type. So I've talked about a board member and a colleague, and finally a CEO I
Yes.
reported to. And in this case, you mentioned the Y. It was when I was at the Y. And I was hired in by a very visionary, a deeply experienced CEO to try to change the model for the Y.
Mm.
Y had a
Right.
very traditional and rather 50-ish kind of model for fundraising that wasn't driven
Yes.
by major gift
But
sensibility,
historically very successful, right? I mean, just
historically successful. Um, so in this case, we had the fifth largest Y in the world, and I knew I was brought in to change the model, to lift it up to the next level. So essentially,
mhm.
I was brought in as who I am sometimes, as a troublemaker, as a
We call
change
it we
maker.
call it change agent. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
that's right. That's a better word, isn't it? Um, but I knew I had his backing. And yet, once I started, I was daunted by the size and the scale of the organization, by the challenge that I had, by the resistance I knew I was going to meet, and I was already starting to meet. The reason that he was so important to me as a mentor was that from the beginning, he had this unflagging belief in me. He had a confidence in me that I lacked in myself.
Wow.
And he believed that I could do things that I didn't yet believe I could do.
Right.
So it was the first experience in my career. And by this time I was late. I was well along in my career. But it was the first time I had the experience of working with someone who believed in me so deeply that I brought out something in myself that I didn't fully realize I had.
Wow. Wow. Great.
That was what brought me to a full kind of realization of my love for the field, my
Yeah.
love for the field and my own capabilities for blending storytelling and communications and fundraising, and for having the courage to lead in a new direction because
That's amazing.
he believed that I could. And
Yeah.
one time he asked me to do something that was so huge and so almost seemingly impossible that I looked at him and I said, "You are very lucky that I love you."
And he said,
Because,
"Well, I am very lucky that I have someone as capable as you to be my partner in making
yeah,
sort of the impossible seem possible
yeah.
and doing these amazing things." Um, I'm interested. First of all, I want everyone to understand in the audience that when you are a development professional, when you're a fundraiser, especially leading within an organization, you are more than just someone that closes gifts, that raises money. You're managing up, like the CEO relationship, managing down staff. You're managing volunteer teams, and trying to be strategic and visionary. So it's a big job, but it's a leadership role. And I'm wondering if you have developed sort of a leadership philosophy, or how you would talk about or describe your leadership thinking when you approach the work. Like, what are some of the important leadership ideas or concepts that are, really valuable to you?
I think the most important concept is for me what I call the long game, and that is the concept of relationships. I've been in big systems. UCLA is one. I'm very familiar. I've served on boards with big systems. And the what I call the short game, the annual number that you need to hit,
Hmm.
you can't avoid that number, but if you are a leader, you can provide some cover for what you and your team needs to do, and ultimately for what will be the success of your organization. And by that, I mean the attempt to close too early on a gift to be able to close by June 30. The long game is the relationship.
Right.
There are no shortcuts to relationship. One of the things that I don't do, and I'm known for this, is I'm not an events-driven fundraiser philosophically.
Yeah.
I do events, and those events are importantly for stewardship, for engagement. And my donors know that they'll hear from me after the event and my
Right.
teams. But I don't do auctions. I don't do runs. I don't do the more short-term things. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be valuable.
Right.
I am careful when we need to do maybe something like that. The why would be a good example, to use it for engagement and to emphasize with my board that success is in the engagement. And I talk about the gifts that we can close over the next year because of it. I really think that long-term thinking has over the years allowed me, and this didn't happen early on, it only happened in sort of the later half of my
Yeah.
career,
Right.
to go into a meeting with a donor not thinking about my number, not thinking about what I wanted or the gift or even the next step, but simply thinking about what it was that I wanted and needed to learn in this relationship. If I had any goal at all, I could walk in with some degree of confidence, thinking that goal was going to be to bring the relationship further. And I learned from myself that if I had that goal, other things happen naturally and not forced. The conversations we needed to have naturally began to evolve, but they evolved out of a better knowledge that I had of that person and who they were and what their interests were.
Hmm.
So I think philosophically, that's probably what drives me. And then the second and only other aspect to my philosophy and leadership is the success of my team. And of course, that's something that everyone should say and would say. But I do think that it gets tested when you stand for your team and say to your board, as I do now, we are going to look at 3-year rolling averages. We're not going to look at the annual number that we need to hit.
Right.
Uh, they can't do that, but I can. We'll celebrate gifts along the way. The success of your team is in the hiring. Um, then as you've heard, and it is an important piece of wisdom, hire the right people, then get out of their way.
Right. Yeah.
Ask occasionally, as my current CEO used to ask me, and still does, are you happy? As long as you're happy, are you happy? Are you productive? What do you need? What do you need from me? The success of your team is not going to be driven by micromanagement. What have you
That's
done
very true.
today? What have you done for me recently? It's going to be driven by what is it that you love doing?
Right.
I retreat with my staff 4 times a year.
Okay,
And
that's great to know.
one of those times is a fun time. We go on a field trip and we,
Okay.
organize what that field trip's going to be. And the other three are, more working aspects. And in a retreat a couple of years ago, at the close of the fiscal year, I asked everyone to come with the idea of, and they could write it down on a piece of paper, it could be private. What could I do for you this year? What could I
Okay.
do for you? What is your one wish? What is your one wish for me to do for you? And
Provocative question.
it was a vulnerable question. I said, I don't know if I'll be able to fulfill all your wishes, but I want to know what they are.
Yeah.
And I was delighted when I brought them home and started opening up these little pieces of paper that I got things like, I want us to be able to bring in a big gift for street medicine. That's my wish. If you could do this. And this was a back office person, not a fundraiser, so she couldn't do it. We had to do it for her. But she loved that program. Another wish, which was easy, could I have more flexibility in my time?
Wow. Yeah.
I found, although I thought I might not, I found that I could fulfill every single wish. And that helped me help my team be successful. If I give someone something I didn't know they needed, more
Right.
flexible time,
Right. And you have the
they're going to
power
be more
to,
productive. And I have the power to do that.
yeah, yeah, which is great. I mean, such a good tactic, such a good idea. But both the concept of bringing people together more than just once a year for a retreat, let's say 4 times, and making
Mhm.
sure there's some fun, but also asking those kinds of questions. How can I help? What more could I potentially do? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. They know me, to be honest, but I didn't say, oh, don't ask me for a raise because I can't do that. I trusted them. I trusted them to know me and know what I could do. And like I said, I was so delighted by some of the humility and mission connectedness of some of their wishes.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Mhm.
Well, let's now jump into the main topic of our conversation, which is all about what you wished you knew early in your career and the lessons you've learned as a fundraiser as you followed your heart, which I love that. Not many of us dare to say that we've followed our heart. Normally, we're saying that we've been very calculated or strategic mentally with our decision making. And I'm fascinated to learn a little bit about how that experience might be a bit different for you. But before we jump into those lessons that you're going to share with us, can you tell us a little bit about why these lessons are actually meaningful and important to you?
They're important to me because they make up who I am and what drives me. They're
Okay.
important to me because I'm a very reflective person. That's the poet in me.
Yep.
I have a spiritual side to my nature. I try to understand how I can bring the best of me to my work. Recently, in fact, as recently as yesterday evening, I was in a meeting in the vestry of our church. The Episcopal Church has boards that are called vestries. And we were discussing a concept I hadn't considered before, and that concept is service as worship.
Okay.
And I
Yep.
have spent my life, I like to think, in service in the nonprofit sector.
Yeah,
And
sure.
it began to dawn on me that that is my form of worship, that my form of prayer. And the lessons that I learned along the way are important more for that reason than for success. I feel for me, success will trail if I have this aspect of myself fulfilled.
Mhm.
That sense of this is how one prays in the world through our action, that service is a form of worship of any sort, is really important to me. And those lessons help me see how I can do that best.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I've always believed at my core that as someone who is living a faith-filled life, that your job, no matter what it is, can lead to service of humanity, service of God. You know, whatever the focus might be, you're in a job to be helpful. You have an important role to play, and it doesn't even matter what the job is. There's a critical and vital
Right.
role for you in that. And so I've always lived a life believing that my job was a ministry.
Hmm.
And it just happened to be in the nonprofit sector and connected to
Yeah.
fundraising, which I loved because there was evidence of impact and advancement. But I look at other jobs that other people have had in the, let's say, the for-profit world or the public sector or even just the private sector. And I think every single one of them has a job that has purpose and has an element of service to
Mhm.
humanity to it, you know. So I
Well,
love
there's
you.
a point that we tend to think, we've talked, I have, about what I would think of as the soft skills. But when you have the ability and the commitment to your mission, you develop those tough hard skills too. So service involves that. Fundraising is very competitive. It requires a competitive nature. And I think that the combination of the soft and the hard skills is what makes us successful. Recently, I turned over my 12-year-old car and bought a new car. And one of my executive colleagues said, I would not want to be on the other side of negotiating that deal with you.
That's right. That's
So
right.
I want to emphasize that it also asks of us to develop and exhibit the tough part of our natures, the competitive part, and that is part of our success as well.
That's great. That's great. Well, we have a half dozen concepts that I want to cover with you. These are things that you and I have talked about that are really meaningful and important lessons that you've learned through your career. And the first one that I wanted to start with is the power of yes and the importance of no. So tell us what you mean by that.
I learned the power of yes in the middle of my career with a very, very tough CEO. She managed by anger, really. I was beginning to intuit that, but the lesson that I learned was whenever my CEO, and this probably applies to anyone that you're on the other side of, hears yes, they relax, they open up, they have been heard.
Hmm.
And that allows you an opening to suggest what might happen if you did this thing. So you might be asked to do something you think is, you're out of your mind to ask me to do that, or I can't.
Right.
Say
Sure.
yes, yes. And as soon as they hear yes, they start smiling and they're nodding. And so they're ready for, what comes next. And you might say, as I often did, you might want to consider that if we did this, we would need that or this other thing might happen. So then you've engaged them in a dialogue about the solution that yes will require. I kind of learned that instinctively along the way, but I had a wonderful experience, not with this particular CEO, but with another, that involved the CEO saying to me, I'm not afraid to ask. I want to ask. I want you to set up a lunch appointment for me every single week, and you will see that I can go out and ask. And I said, that's great. I'm so glad you're willing to do this, and I can see you're excited. But I have a question for you. I said, do you want to ask or do you want yes?
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, I said, yeah, because they're two different things.
For sure.
I said, I can see you're not afraid of asking, but my job is to get you to yes.
Hmm.
So let's talk about how many lunches we need to have you involved in and where I can best position you. So it was just a beautiful moment because I could see his face. It dawned on him that he knew what I was talking about. But I
Sure.
didn't have to say, no, that's not a very good idea.
Right. You didn't
which
lead
was
with
one of
no. You
been my
didn't lead with
instinct. My
no.
instinct would have said, "Oh, no, that's not going to work."
And
Um,
you know fundamentally that an appetite and willingness to meet with people will result in a yes eventually, maybe
yeah,
not if they just come out and ask after 5 minutes sitting down to lunch with someone, right? But
yeah.
at least there's the willingness.
It's sort of a Socratic method of dialogue, if you will, that puts you, Socratic method would be asking a question in return,
Hmm.
puts you more or less on not exactly a peer level, but on a dialogue level with someone. And a lot of times it's hard or we're unwilling to get to that place. But the power of that yes is so remarkable. There's another aspect to the power of yes, the one that I want to conclude with here on this subject, and that is the power of challenging yourself to say yes. When I was first with MLK and we were forming and designing the hospital, I had no staff, no donors, no board, no donor base, no nothing yet.
Right.
The board asked me to launch a maternity campaign. And that was because the hospital had been planned by the county that was building it under resourcing maternity. And I said, I have two questions. How much time do I have and how much money? So I need two numbers. And they
Hmm.
gave me those two numbers, 8 million, 18 months. And a lot of my instincts said, oh, that you should be cautious with them. But instead, I simply said, yes, let's do this. And I scared myself. So that was a yes. That was a challenge to me, not so much to them, but to me.
Right.
And once I had committed myself, I had to figure it out. And we did it together. And I got that 18 million in just under the wire in 16 months. But the power of yes to yourself is also as important as the power of yes to your board or to your CEO.
Yeah. Well, what's the other end of that? The importance of no.
The importance of no is to stand for your mission, to stand for what you know to be right in front of donors. And so that was how I thought
Good. I
about
got you.
no.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the no in terms of we receiving no, because we receive no all the time. And
Sure.
and we're taught rightfully to try to explore that no. What's behind it? What does that mean? No, I mean the power of you saying no, the power of me saying no. And
Mission drift, if you will. Yeah.
two examples I have of that. One where I worked for a college called Art Center College of Design, and
Sure.
one of the top three design schools in the world. And we had a big corporate program, corporate sponsorship, and we had Microsoft come in, and they were interested. You know, Microsoft's a big gun, and I had the chair of the computer graphic design department with me, the dean of the faculty with me, and we were meeting the Microsoft team across the table. And the Microsoft team, confident as they are and used to having their way, here's the money that we're willing to commit, and here's what we want in return.
Right.
And what they wanted in return was the intellectual property of the students in that workshop that they were sponsoring.
Understood. Right.
And we said, no, the intellectual property, the department chair started explaining how intellectual property worked for us, but everybody was nervous, I could tell.
That's
And
right.
this is how it works, and this is how we do it. And Microsoft said, nope, it's not going to be how it works for us. And then there was silence. So the dean of the faculty, the department chair, we were a small college, we needed that money. I
Yeah.
know what they were thinking.
Sure.
So they were silent. I knew it was my turn to talk. And I said, I think that we need to conclude this conversation because I don't think that we are going to give you what you're looking for, and we don't want to waste your time any longer.
Hmm. Powerful.
Microsoft stood up, walked away. We didn't have a happy ending in terms of, oh, we're going to give you that gift anyway, because
Right.
they didn't. But here's the happy ending. That story ran like wildfire through the faculty, through the department, And it has been decades since I worked at Art Center, and I attended the retirement party of one of the department chairs, and they were still telling that story.
The
They
time we
told
stood
that
up.
story about the fundraiser who stood up for them,
Right,
who
right,
didn't
right.
sell them out for the money.
Hmm.
And I was proud of that, and I'm still proud of that. And the other important no happened in my current role. We had we were in the final stage being site visit with a foundation that was committing a large gift. They had invited us, and the proposal was in their hands. The board, it was on the board agenda. So it was already that far along, the program officers, et cetera. And we were ready for the site visit, and we had two officers, one who came in person, but the other one chose not to come in person, but instead to do it by speakerphone. This was right before the pandemic and before Zoom. I had with me, this was for a nursing program, and
Okay.
I had with me the vice president of nursing and the other program officer. We were seated in my office with a speakerphone. So the other officer on the phone asked about diversity and what we were doing for diversity. I said, our staff, 92% diverse. That's very happy. What about your nurses? Ready with all the answers. And she says, trying to break it down, well, how many of this type of ethnicity and how many of that? Because she says on the speakerphone, we know the last thing we need is more Filipinos in nursing. God knows we got enough of them.
Oh my gosh.
My vice president for nursing was a Filipino.
Well, yeah,
She had worked her
but
way up very with
what a
great
strange comment
with yeah, all that. And
coming
I
from a
could tell
funder,
that
coming
the
from a
program
funder.
officer across from me was embarrassed and appalled, and he stepped in
Sure.
and he said, well, are you finished now? I have a few questions of them too. And he tried to guide the
Yeah,
conversation
recover.
to a different place, and he did that successfully. But after the meeting, as I walked him out, he apologized again. I said that was really a terrible moment for us. I walked back in. I apologized first to the vice president of
Right.
nursing, and then I walked into the CEO's office, and I told her that I was going to withdraw our proposal that was pretty much a done deal for $250,000. That's a quarter of a million.
It's
And I
big. Yeah,
told
it's
her
huge.
why I was going to withdraw it. And she said, I agree with you. I want them to know why you withdrew. So I called the other program officer, the one with whom I had been in person the next day, and said, I am so sorry. I know that you've gone through a lot of work to get us to this place. We are going to withdraw our proposal because it's clear that we are not aligned in our values.
Wow.
And alignment
Ouch.
of values is very, very important to us. So
Zinger.
thank you for getting us this far. And he said, I understand. He said, could you give me, this was on a Friday, could you give me until Monday? I said, I'd be happy to do that, but we are not changing our mind. That proposal is, as of today, formally withdrawn. And he said, fine, could we have another conversation on Monday? I said, yes. On Monday, he calls back and he says, well, I'm going to ask you to do a little more work. And I said, what's that? He said, I'm going to ask you to work on the budget because we are inviting you to apply for 450 for the purpose of the work in your clinics that you are expanding. And we will not touch your work plan. We will have nothing to do with your objectives. They are yours. And we will not review it any further. Just send us the budget for 450.
Interesting. Interesting.
Now, that's not
Interesting.
the outcome I expected. And I didn't do it, as a strategy. And that
I
was the
understand.
important part.
Yeah.
And the important part also for me in this story was that when I walked into my CEO's office, and we are a young health system who really needed that quarter of a million,
100%.
she did not miss a beat.
That's good.
She said,
Yeah.
I agree with you,
Yeah. The importance of no.
the importance of
Good. Thank you. Thank you. I know the next one is all about staying or leaving, and you have some interesting ways of thinking about what role you want to be in, whether you stay or you leave. How do you think about that?
I like to think about that as, in one way, finish my work. So I usually go into a role thinking about what success looks like for me, not
Okay.
just that year, but what's my overall, what would make me feel like I had succeeded and completed my work here.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's good.
That sometimes I'm staying longer than I'm comfortable because maybe I have a tough CEO or tough challenges. But I always assess my ability to succeed. So staying or leaving for me has to do with that kind of assessment. If I think that I can finish my work and succeed, I will stay. If I don't, then I'm going to put together a very kind of longer runway exit strategies so I have good things in place. The story that I wanted to share about staying or leaving also has to do with integrity. Integrity is part of our reputation, it's a big part. Donors look for that whether we realize it or not.
Okay.
When I went to the Y, I was treated, I had a wonderful board, and a woman named Nancy Munger, Charlie's wife, was on that board. And she invited me over to her home somewhere at the end of the first month and told me how grateful she was that I had come and how glad I had been to a board meeting already, etc. So I was very welcomed. And about 3 months in, I got a call from a recruiter at Korn Ferry who I knew very well. And she said, I have a role that's perfect for you, just perfect. And I
Right, of
said,
course.
you know, you can't be talking to me. You know this. I have just come to the Y. And she said, oh, within a year, all bets are off. If you leave within the first year, all bets are off. You can do that. It won't hurt you. And I said, I don't even want to talk to you.
Right.
So she said, okay, let me tell you this. Whatever you're earning, I will double it. And I said, uh, thinking just for a second about the fact that I had a daughter who was going to be going
Sure.
to
Sure.
NYU soon. We were facing
Of
tuition
course.
in private school. I said, well, you haven't talked to your client about that, but that's a good play. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something though. My reputation is built on my integrity. If I leave now, I lose the integrity that I have gained with this board, with this donor, with this CEO who recruited me,
Right.
everybody else who knows me. They may want to know the story, and I may say I've got a story, but at the end of the day, that story is not going to stick as much as my loss of integrity will stick. And you know what, Chris? It was in that job that as I transitioned out following a CEO who retired, a board member who knew me very well said that she wanted to take me out to lunch and talk to me about a very unusual opportunity about a group of leaders who are trying to create a state-of-the-art hospital in a low-income community. If
Yeah.
I had not stayed, I would not have the opportunity to do the job I love now.
That's great. I love it. Great story. And there are a couple more that I wanted to get through before our time is up. The next one is how you hire for grit. And
Mhm.
I know grit is a popular concept, but I bet you have an interesting spin on it. Tell me.
Grit has to do with a little bit of hunger and a little bit of confidence. And my one story about grit, although I look for it in everybody that I hire, I look for more than technical expertise. I can see that on a resume. But
Okay.
once I'm interviewing, I'm looking for other things. I'm looking for character, I'm looking for personality, curiosity, uh,
Great.
confidence. I'm
Keeps
looking
coming
for
up.
someone who has questions for me.
Good.
I
Good.
won't go further with somebody who talks the whole hour and has no questions at all for me.
Yeah, good.
So, in this one instance, I had taken a courtesy interview that was for a director of major gifts role. This was at Art Center. And the courtesy interview was taken because I knew the person very well who had recommended that I see this person. And I wanted to do a favor, and I was curious myself. So I do the interview, and the person was borderline qualified, but I was interested in how they showed themselves in the interview. So I moved them to this person to the second round.
Okay.
And in the second round, he comes in, sits down in front of me, and he starts. And he says, "Look, I know I don't have the qualifications you're looking for this role. I want to tell you something. If you hire me, I will show you everything that I can do."
Hmm.
I was so struck by that courage, that, like I said, hunger. We went on to talk about what that would mean, what I would look for, that I hired him. And when I took my decision to the president of the college, he seemed surprised. He said,
Sure.
this is a person, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm going to take a chance on this person. And he was one of the best hires of my career.
Yeah.
He closed,
Non-traditional, but it's a good
he
hire.
closed a $2 million gift from a parent in his second year.
Hmm.
And he never let me down.
Yeah. That's
Remained
amazing.
committed to that. And I call that grit.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what I look for. I know it's a
Yeah.
profit concept.
Yeah. But it's important. It is. Resilience is so essential for someone in fundraising. There's no question about it. We know you don't bat 1,000. You don't even really bat 300 or 400 maybe
Right.
in this work, but you got to keep swinging. So um,
Well,
that
the other thing
non-traditional.
that you're reminding me of, I love that word resilience, is that hire, he was committed to me. He brought loyalty in because he knew if I hired him, I had taken a risk on his
Yeah.
behalf. And
Right.
there's something that bonds you as a team when you've taken risks for one another.
Hmm.
Not just when I establish my expectations and walk away to my next meeting.
Yeah.
When you know that mutually you have taken risks together for one another.
Yeah, and powerful. That's so important. That probably lends into this next concept, which is about building a non-traditional team and
Mhm.
the budgeting you do. So tell me a little bit about that combination of budgeting and building a non-traditional team.
Mhm. Well, by non-traditional team, I mean blending. So that's an important way to lead into this concept. It's something that I began doing in this role, and I truly, truly wish that I had realized how effective it could be in my earlier roles.
Okay.
We were a startup, and we didn't have money to hire all the best in every one of my slots, for example. So, so I thought, okay, I am going to outsource some of these functions, which is not a new concept, but I'm going to hire the vendor, the outsource person or persons, as though they are my staff. I'm going to ask them to attend my weekly staff meetings. I'm going to bring them by invitation to our retreats.
Okay.
And grant making is a good example. I've always had grants people as part of my departments, and I outsourced it. And I outsourced it to someone who was building at that time a small grants making agency.
Right.
And oh my goodness, knocked it out of the park all the time. What I realized then was that I couldn't afford to bring inside the expertise that he was bringing me. But if we carefully controlled his retainer and the work that he would do, I was going to get the greater benefit.
Hmm.
I did that with, I knew I needed a finance function. I hired somebody on the outside because I didn't have a full-time function. And she grew with the team. And she is, frankly, next month hosting the whole team retreat at her home. When I have people like that, Social media is another example. Someone I
Mhm.
wanted to bring inside, actually, but she and her partner had a small business and she didn't want to be inside. She wanted the flexibility of being outside. So I outsourced that function. In traditional terms, they would be considered vendors. I never called them vendors. I called them by their first names, Rachel or Stephen or Linda. I hoped that when they were in my team meetings, when they were at the retreat, when we did our one-on-ones or small group meetings, that they appeared to everyone else as a member of my team. And over time, and this is since 2012, two of them, the finance and the grant making, have continued to work as part of the team and have gained enormous institutional knowledge and become the most valuable people that I could never have afforded if I had to bring that talent inside. And Rachel, the social media person for the last 6 years, they act like team members and they are fully committed to our mission. I just wish when I'm, in the budget, the annual budget round in the spring, and I can hold my bottom line on salaries and benefits, my CFO will give me a little latitude in professional services because he knows he's got the flexibility. We can cut off that contract at the end of the year if we need to.
Sure.
If I offer my CFO some flexibility, I get more than enough that I need in return.
Oh,
And
that's
I
good.
just wish I would have figured that out from the beginning.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good. That's
yeah.
such a good lesson. I love that. And I'll ask you in a minute about maybe the advice that you'd give your younger self. So that's one of those things. If there's another one, that would be great. But I wanted to end with listening and silence and what that means to you. What that lesson means to you.
Well, I mentioned my spiritual nature and that aspect of me that's creative, which involves a lot of quietness. But listening is part of our work. And I would say for me, I'm a talker, one of the hardest parts being silent and listening. Um, but we always have good results if we do that. One time early in the development of our Women in Philanthropy program, Karen, my partner, and I took a woman out to lunch whose husband had been generous, but not at the level we knew they were capable of, and we didn't
Okay.
know his wife. We started the lunch with the opening question, "Tell us about yourself, Ruth." By the time Ruth finished talking, we had had a waiter come to the table asking us if we would like to see a dinner menu.
Right.
I
Yeah.
am not, and she had the most amazing story, and it was a powerful story. And from that story, we understood why we had not received the largest gift we might of generosity from her family. That's because we didn't know the pathway in. We learned the pathway in, their love for their son, his work. A few years later, a naming gift to the Neurological Institute came from Ruth, this time, and her husband. Um, Another time of listening had to do with a gift that had already come in. It was at the Y, and I had started an annuity fund, and I had announced the annuity opportunities to the board. And the next day, one of the board members calls, and Bill says, "I'd like to give you a gift to start that fund." And he committed $100,000. And fortunately, I didn't have another meeting to rush off to. And I liked Bill. So I thanked him. That's wonderful. But I said, Bill, I know you pretty well, but I'm not sure I know your story about how you got connected to the why.
Great.
What brought you to the why?
Yeah.
So I asked him to tell me that story, and he gave it to me. And I had the time to listen. And it was a beautiful story and longish. And at the end of the story, he says, you know, I don't think I'm doing enough. He says, I think I should do 200,000. And I said, oh my goodness, Phil, I love you for this. So thank you. If I hadn't listened, If I hadn't given him the time and remained silent and let him tell his story, we wouldn't have received that gift.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. The power of listening, right?
Mhm,
It's so good. And
mhm.
I think we all need to be reminded of that. I mean, it was you asking the right question,
Yeah.
right? But it was also the space that you gave to hear the answer. So thank you for that. And
Goes back to relationships, doesn't it, Chris?
it does. It
If your
does.
goal
It's
is relationships, then you can ask those questions.
That's right. That's right. And having the space, holding the space for that person, giving them the opportunity to share. As you said, not rushing off to the next meeting, just trying to be present, trying to be in service to them, helping them, fulfill their philanthropic priorities and helping them achieve what they want to in giving back.
Mhm.
So, Dyan, thank you for being such a force for good. Thank you also for being a teacher and a mentor to so many others. Your impact in our nonprofit and fundraising industry is beyond measure, and I hope that this interview really has blessed a lot of current and future nonprofit leaders and fundraisers and others who aspire to do good. And that concludes our conversation today. Thank you again, Dyan.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And again, this has been Mastering Fundraising. We have a number of other podcasts, including Lead for Good and The Nonprofit Edge. Check those out, like and subscribe. And until next time, continue to do good out there and help make this world a better place. So thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.